Hello, friends. Welcome. And today I'm excited to talk about positive relationships and the positive impact that having healthy relationships can have on our emotional, mental, and physical well being. I love this quote by George Vaillant, who was the director of the Harvard Grant Study for 30 years, studying hundreds of men throughout their lifetimes, and came to the conclusion that happiness is love, full stop. So what we're going to talk about today, kind of an overview of positive relationships, what they look like, what some of the practices are to nurture those healthy relationships, a look at attachment style, which is how our approach to relationships is developed in early childhood and how it might look now. And then we're going to take the lens more broadly to look at how do we connect, not just individually, but in our larger communities. And we will finish up with kind of an overview of the findings of the Harvard Grant Study, and then also a word on creating connection from Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. So, just really, really simply and straightforward, positive relationships are built on the ability to connect. So, our relationships in our lives can include that of a romantic or affectionate partner, our parents, other members of our family, including siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, can be really important, and all of our friends, and then also our coworkers too. It's really important to include the people that we are going to spend most of our time with, which is the people at our jobs, and how to build really positive and friendly relationships there. And relationships, all of these connections with other people make up our social world. I love this character. It's the Chinese character for listening. I think most of us would think of listening just with our ears, but this is a holistic approach to listening, which includes the ears, but also you and your connection with the person that you're listening to, your eyes, your undivided attention, and really having your heart in it. And that's what really creates positive relationships. So, what do they look like? What are some of the things that make relationships positive? Interest is really having a true interest in what matters to the other person. And it's important to note that all of these are reciprocal. So you have interest in another person, and the expectation is that they will be interested in your stuff too. And in most relationships, there's some place where those cross over. Um, but it really is important to get at the things that are most important to another person. Understanding in the way that you make the effort to make sure that what someone is communicating to you is clear and that you have a clear understanding of it, but also understanding in terms of emotion. So, kind of the emotional intelligence to understand what another person is feeling. Responsibility is our way of connecting with each other, being responsible um, in your interactions with another person, kind of your responsibility to commit to being taking care of that person, taking care with your interactions with them. Empathy, again, is that willingness to feel with other people. So, an understanding of a recognition and an understanding of another person's emotions and situations. Using positive language, this is something that we need to continuously check in on because our words can be really powerful in either supporting or harming, maybe unintentionally, but can be really harmful. So becoming more comfortable in using positive language, expanding your vocabulary, so using strengths language, and then having open communication where people, it's kind of a sense of safety, where psychological safety, where people, the people that you're in relationships feel safe communicating to you, kind of speaking up, voicing, having their voice be heard, asking for help if they need it, and you respond accordingly, and then you also feel the same way. So just really quick again on empathy, what it is the ability to recognize and understand and relate to others' emotions, but not to take them over or not to tell someone how they should be feeling. So feeling with people, allowing them to have the space to feel their feelings, not kind of minimizing, diminishing, or trying to fix or cover emotions, kind of sharing in that with them, feeling the urge to connect with that person even more closely and the urge to help, but really being aware of what kind of help is important at the time. Again, not necessarily jumping into fixing everything, but allowing that person to have the space. Good communication is critical. If you ask anybody, scientists or not scientists, about what's important in a relationship, it's communication. So communication is, again, reciprocal, the ability to verbalize. So people aren't mind readers. You need to be able to tell them to speak, to listen, to understand, and then to take action on what other people say. So your ability to communicate that to someone else, and then your ability to receive that. So how it looks and feels is active listening. So that's not just hearing with your ears, but taking in body language and things that aren't said, kind of reading between the lines with somebody that you know well, asking questions, responding, using facial expressions to express to the other person that you're paying attention. As I mentioned before, using strengths language. So starting with the positive, asking really positive questions instead of if somebody's having a bad day, making space for them to talk about it, but letting them know like, hey, that was really great how you, showed your kindness in responding to that person that way, even if it was difficult for you. Sharing information and feelings. So again, reciprocal, that goes back and forth, letting people know how you feel. Sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes it's hard to express difficult emotions, but in almost all cases, it's better to express that than to just hold it in. I think a lot of us do that. We kind of like hold things in until we get to the exploding point. So being able to have those conversations in the moment or at an appropriate time, being aware both of interpreting someone else's body language and then what yours is saying, so that your words and your body language are expressing the same thing. Being open, openness is being open-minded, kind of being ready to listen to other people's um, opinions and thoughts, and hearing them, and then also being open to sharing yours. And then always assuming positive intent, kind of positive until proven not positive, especially in communicating through social media. Intent and tone can be misinterpreted. So, with the people that you're in relationships with, kind of just keep in mind that their positive intent should always be there, as should yours. One of the really powerful tools of positive psychology is active constructive responding. This is a great way to communicate. There's research that has indicated that in close relationships, It's important how you respond to bad news, but even more important in strengthening and developing and deepening your bonds with other people is how you respond to good news, which is always kind of a little bit of an aha moment for people because it feels like the critical moments are kind of the hard and difficult moments, but positive moments are super critical too. And so think about when someone shares good news with you, how do you respond? And this is particularly interesting for parents to think about and for partners to think about when it's someone that you're used to being around and talking to all the time. They may be trying to express something that's a really positive thing for them, and we kind of just are not paying attention. We're looking at our phones, we're thinking about other things. So it's really important to try to be present in the moment for your people, especially if they're trying to share something good with you. So if, think about your child or your partner or a really close friend or even a coworker or a fellow student, sharing some really great news with you, try to go with this upper left quadrant, which is active, meaning enthusiastic, making eye contact, it's really authentic. And then constructive means talking to them a little bit more about it. If you think back to when we talked about positive emotions, we talked about savoring. And so this is a way of helping your person savor their moment. So constructively asking questions. How did you feel? That must have been amazing. Tell me about how you think you accomplished that. What were some of the strengths that you used? And that sounds a little artificial in the moment, but you'll get used to it and kind of find your own style of being able to do this. But again, we talked about strength spotting and how much more meaningful it is when you can give someone really specific feedback instead of just like, hey, awesome, great job. Talk about really specifically what you observed, or if someone's sharing something with you, ask them more questions to kind of build that enthusiasm and that excitement around the occasion. And then that way you can savor it together. And think about the times with these other three styles that maybe you did these and you can catch yourself doing them. So passive constructive is kind of like, yeah, that's great, good for you. And then moving on. And so you don't share in the moment. I think we do this not necessarily intentionally, but because we're just not necessarily 100% focused. And so, like, yeah, great, good for you. What's for dinner? So think about moving that kind of response back over into the more active category. And then active constructive is probably the worst, is not only when you're kind of making them feel not so great about their news, but you're actively being negative about it. You're quashing the event, you're dismissive and demeaning, like actively destructive. So this can happen sometimes between partners when the partner jumps ahead to like the impact of the news. So, hey, they posted this really great job opening. I'm super excited to apply for it. Isn't that great? And then the other person can say things like, oh my God, remember the last time you interviewed? You were so stressed and you completely blew it. I'd be really worried about you applying for this. Something to just bring up things that makes the person actively feel bad. And then the passive destructive is really just kind of avoiding and not even acknowledging. Passive constructive is kind of meh, and passive destructive is basically just not even acknowledging it all. And you know how terrible that feels if someone does that to you. So try to really intentionally think about the opportunities to actively and constructively respond. I wanted to talk a little bit about attachment style. Um, this theory comes from attachments early attachments that are developed in childhood. So research has indicated that your primary caregiver in most cases is the mother, but in other cases it can be, some other primary caregiver that's taking care of a baby and a child. And we learn from that person whether or not we're safe in our growing and in our lives, and whether or not that person is going to be there, whether or not they're dependable. And so those really early experiences kind of shape the way that we approach our relationships throughout our lives and then later in our life. And so it's important to identify what your style is. And if there are some things that you recognize here that are preventing you from creating stronger bonds in your relationships, then the awareness is there and you can start to um, address some of these issues. And so these attachment styles are on two axes. So one of the axes is in our relationships, are we approach or are we avoid? So did we grow up feeling really safe and secure in our relationships? And so we are comfortable in approaching other people, that we have the feeling, we're confident that people are going to be good, that we're going to be able to connect with them. And if we are not secure in that, if we didn't grow up with really secure relationships, then we tend to be avoidant, which is you tend not to um, go intentionally into develop relationships. You kind of can isolate yourself, or you can approach and then pull back when things seem like they're going wrong. So avoid and approach on one axis, and then our level of anxiety around relationships on the other. So again, do we feel secure, or do we feel kind of a need, an anxious need for grasping onto those bonds? And so the four styles: secure is someone who is comfortable with the approach, with approaching relationships and feels secure in that. So there's real low anxiety around relationship development. They're confident around that. And they also are resilient in bouncing back from maybe like a breakup, which is hard for everybody always, but maybe bouncing back from it a little bit more quickly and less emotional kind of damage to ourselves. Anxious, preoccupied is someone who they kind of reach out, they do that reaching out part of it because they're kind of always seeking those deeper bonds, but they're anxious. And so they can be people who tend to be sort of clingy or needy in their relationships. Dismissive, avoidant are people who didn't feel particularly strong and secure in attachments at a younger age, and that comes into their later age. And so they're emotionally distant and ambivalent, kind of like, I'm not taking the chance of developing relationships because I don't want to be hurt, or I'll hurt you before you hurt me, kind of distant and isolating in their relationships. And then the last quadrant is fearful avoidant. And so that's somebody who has a high level of anxiety around relationships, and they tend to be a push-pull person, where they kind of like get really deep into a relationship. They have a lot of internal conflict around those connections. They tend to be unpredictable, so emotionally expressive, kind of dramatic in relationships, asking a lot and then backing away. And so it's important to be able to identify for you and for your own self-awareness. And then also you might, if you're having difficulties around relationships with other people and kind of bonding with them, you might recognize other people in some of these styles as well and have some empathy for kind of how they feel about their relationships and be able to support them in developing, feeling more secure in attachments. So that's for people to in interpersonal relationships. But let's take a little bit of a look, step back, and how we connect in our communities. So two things that are really, really important, two components that are important for us to feel connected to our communities, our sense of belonging. So all humans have an emotional need to affiliate with and be accepted by members of a group. So the mutual benefits of belonging to a group are acceptance, attention, and support. And so those again are reciprocal. You kind of give and take from the belonging from the group. This comes from this is an evolutionary need to be in community so that we can support each other. And it's important, when you come to a college, whether you work at a place or you're coming to be a student at the institution, that you feel a part of it, that you're a part of this and you're accepted and you're getting the attention and support that you need, and you can provide that for the other members of the group. The second component is mattering, feeling like you matter to your group or to your community. And mattering is similar to sense of belonging, but it's made up of two kind of complementary experiences that build on each other. And that's the experience of feeling valued by the group and then also being able to add value. So feeling valued is that you're able to contribute something of significance to the group, and then adding value is the sense that you're needed, that you are needed and you belong here and what you bring to this group is important. So let's take a look. The Harvard Grant Study, as you might recall, is a longitudinal study that followed male students that were enrolled as undergrads at Harvard starting in the late 1930s. So it's one of the longest studies, and it's really, really important to have this many years of data looking at these people's lives. And they actually, to expand the sample and the kind of generalized population from this study, also brought in males from other areas of Boston. So kind of looking at different demographics in the city to compare. And so all of this data over all of this time, just checking in with these people to see what was going on with them. Are they happy? Are they successful? Are they healthy? Provided these really simple insights for us that I think most of us know, but it's nice to have the science behind it, that social connections are good for us and loneliness is not. That being socially connected, feeling like you belong, feeling like you matter, feeling like people love you, they support you, they have your back, that enables us to be healthier emotionally, mentally, and physically. And loneliness can actually be really dangerous, not just for our psychological health, but for our physical health. And quality is key in our relationships. So it doesn't matter that you have, hundreds of friends or thousands of followers on social media. It's the people in your life. And it also is not just a commitment to somebody. So they looked at partnerships, marriages, and friendships that the people were committed to each other, but they weren't really healthy. That can be just as damaging as not having that relationship in your life. So really high quality, being attentive to your relationships, all these things we're talking about that contribute to positive relationships. And then finally, one really interesting finding over time is that good relationships protect not just our bodies, but our brains. And so we know that there tends to be cognitive decline as we get older that can occur as states like dementia and Alzheimer's and all these things that are just really, really hard for people later in life. And the research from this study has shown that our positive relationships contribute to protection against our minds as well as our bodies. So to put it into practice, replace screen time with people time. So put your phone down, put your games down, and interact with the humans in your lives. Doing something new together, so especially in kind of long-term committed relationships, novelty is a great thing. So try new things, date night, do things with your friends. If you always do exactly the same thing, mix it up a little bit, try to do something new. Um, Number three is to make the effort to repair old rifts. So, one of the biggest regrets that people have at the end of their lives is connections that had been destroyed or that they were never able to rebuild or never made the effort to rebuild. So family feuds, friendships that broke up over things, sometimes we don't even remember what it was. Make the effort to reach back out to those people because it's really important to hold them close. And then finally, lean into relationships, really put the effort into creating these quality relationships. The second insight is from our Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who is an MD, a doctor. I actually had the opportunity to hear him speak once recently, and he said, "Love is more powerful than any prescription I can write." So he's done a lot of research. He actually considers loneliness a public health threat, and so has done a lot of research on the impact of loneliness and then also how to connect. What are the important things to bring positive relationships and the benefits of those into our lives? And so the things that Dr. Murthy identifies on how to connect, number one is service. So doing something good for other people, volunteering, helping out, all of those things where you kind of step outside yourself and you focus on another person. It's beneficial to whomever it is you're helping, but it's also good for you. It helps us just really connect and feel good about ourselves, but have the opportunity to just really bring our best authentic self to a situation where we can be of service to others. This message is clear. Spend time with humans, spend time with people, and think about the quality of your time. So the conversations that you can have. We do sometimes have to connect with people through technology, so Zoom calls and phone calls and kind of back and forth on social media, but make sure that you really think about the quality of that and the depth of your relationships. And then he advocates for a shift in culture. So thinking about our institutions, if you think about Gateway, how do we build the opportunity and the supportive connection into what we're doing? So creating opportunities where we can connect more closely. It used to not really be okay to be friends with the people that you work with. You're supposed to, go to work, leave that there, come home, and those are two separate lives. But research is showing that it's actually really, really important to have friends at work and have friends at school. So making the effort, we're doing that at the college level, but also at the individual level, building those relationships. And how it looks and feels, a note on self-compassion. So it's important for you to have a healthy sense of yourself before you can really connect in deeper ways with other people. So a sense of self-awareness, and some of this comes from emotional intelligence, but a really strong sense of self-awareness and working towards your strengths and building those. And then self-compassion. So caring as much about yourself and being as kind to yourself as you would to other people teaches you how to be able to reach out and having the courage to reach out. It can be really scary, especially as we get older. It's harder to build friendships, but just having the courage to reach out, take a few little small steps, chat with people. Um, when we're building community online, the really generous comments that you can put into a discussion board that helps you feel closer and build deeper relationships. So, kind of just being there for each other when times are hard. But clearly, relationships are the most important thing.